Hi, everybody. Welcome back to the San Diego Bass Fishing Podcast, where we talk about bass fishing in the county of San Diego, Southern California, trials and tribulations, politics, how to catch bass. I
It
have to cut you off in an hour.
takes me an hour just to get through introductions.
Right? I know it. So anyway, we'll go ahead and get started. Welcome everybody back to the San Diego Bass Fishing Podcast. Today we have luminary of the San Diego. Let's see, how would I put this? Luminary of the San Diego um, Lake. Gosh, how would I put that, Jim?
Um, I'm
Oh,
probably the world's biggest fan of the diversity of San Diego County for flora and fauna, and especially fish.
all right. We'll leave it at that. But so Jim, if you don't know Jim, Jim was the lake manager or the city lake manager until he retired in 2003. Is that correct?
That's right, 1974 to 2003.
Yeah. And Jim oversaw a lot of the things, a lot of the improvements that in the San Diego lakes that a lot of people take for granted at this point. And so we're gonna just kind of jump in and talk about this stuff. Where did you? So you started in 1974.
As
Um,
the manager of the lakes in '74, but I actually started working on the lakes when I was 12 in 1959.
okay, and that was on Sutherland, right?
That was at Sutherland. My dad was probably one of the best known bass fishermen here, along with maybe seven or eight other guys, and was very well liked. And I was hanging around, and I kind of got a lot of benefit by virtue of how much people liked him.
Yeah, yeah. And so you ended up like basically almost living at Sutherland there for a
Oh, I
while, right?
literally did.
Did you?
Yeah, my last year, believing I was going to eventually make the major leagues, was my last year of Major League Little League. And so after that, when I was 12 years old, I knew that living at that lake was key to me. And the dam keeper up there, Chuck Martin, his son had just gotten married and moved out, and he needed someone to mow the lawn.
Well, that'll work. That'll work. So so when you started as a lake manager, what do you guys what was your job? What does your job entail as a lake manager for you in 1974?
Well, in 1974, we had quite a lot to overcome because there was a bit of a rebellion going on
Okay.
about how the lakes were being managed. And I had quite a background. When I was 19, I was, given charge of Lower Otay. And 1971, I was asked to open Choice Lake for the first time, and I ran it from '71 until '74 when they decided to name me the City Lakes manager. But when I say overcoming things, I mean basically one of my old friends, a guy that most people know as one of the early pros here, Bobby Sandberg. My dad taught Bobby plastic worm fishing, and I'd been in my job for maybe a week, and he called to tell me that Pisces was planning on blockading the road into at El Monte Road, leading into El Cap prior to the opening of the season. And this was a week after I came into the program, and I hadn't been working in the program for years.
What was why did Pisces was the bass club, is one of the original bass clubs
Yeah,
of
they
San
they were
Diego.
they were one of our very first local clubs, and what had happened, frankly, the city was allowing the concessionaire and people in the tackle business to utilize the reservoirs at the expense of the public and
Right.
of the resources. and it was a problem. And that was one of the things I was asked to do, is to clean that up. So, we went from well over 125 members of the media, and you can put quotes around that, air quotes if you like. And when I got it straightened out, we probably had a total of 15.
Oh yeah. So you had 125 people fishing the lakes before they were open.
Yeah,
Like,
they not necessarily all of them didn't show up at every event, but a
yeah.
lot of them thought that they deserved something, and they kind of fall in line with some anglers who would tell me that they made these lakes, and the sad reality for them is that they wouldn't have existed or been known were it not for the lakes first.
Yeah. Yeah. Right. So so you and I asked you this earlier, and I'm just going to jump right into this. Is you had a big part in stocking trout in the lakes? Did you not?
Well, I inherited one. The city had always been planting Murray and Miramar
Uh-huh.
with 32,000 pounds a year, and they put 16,000 pounds in San V, and those 16,000 pounds were matched by the state through the Department of Fish and Game.
Okay. Um, what years were those? Was it
Well,
always happening in Murray and Miramar, like since the 50s,
well,
or did it?
actually, before the city of San Diego had Lake Murray, it was operated by the Helix Water District.
Yeah.
So the same outfit that operates Jennings at that time
Right.
ran Lake Murray. So there was a history of planting trout, and it was enormously popular. And again, these were all private hatchery trout, and at that time they came from the Whitewater Trout Farm. They averaged about a pound and a quarter,
Hmm.
and ran to about 4 pounds for the most part.
Hmm. Yeah. So there's an interesting thing that happened, and that was the trout that got stocked in Upper Otay.
Right, I did do that.
So how did you do that? And where did that money come from? Like
Okay,
Upper Otay
so
is a catch and release fishery.
yeah, what had happened is that Upper Otay had been closed while it was a Florida bass hatchery. And I went through the process of going back to the Department of Fish and Game and having the regs changed so that instead of it being a closed water, it would be a restricted water, restricted to catch and release fishing.
Mhm.
And so I had seen a great example of that at a lake in Arizona many years earlier called Becker Lake. And I felt it would be amazing to put some trout in there. And so I was able actually to use trout that would have gone into Lake Murray, but Lake Murray, because of some water issues related to working on the treatment plant, the trucks weren't able to get in there. So I could just shift some of those trout. Actually, I think it was only 1,200 pounds shifted from Murray over to Upper Otay. And when we opened Upper Otay for the first time in the modern era, because it had been open in years distant, it Upper Otay looked like a bowl of Cheerios when you saw all the float tubes out there.
I'm sure it did. I'm sure it did. So what year was that? When was the second opener for
Gosh,
Upper Otay?
now that's a $64,000 question because I don't remember the year.
Was it in the
Uh,
70s or in the 80s?
yeah, it was probably going to be in the early 80s.
Oh, okay. Yeah. And then now Upper Otay is a special, it was and could be a very special lake, as in that was the first lake that had the Florida strain largemouth bass put into it, right? And then everything
Right.
came from there.
Yes, that's right. It was the center of the universe in the
Yeah.
West of Florida bass production.
Right.
And so the fish that are in Clear Lake, the fish that went all over the state of California and eventually to Texas, when they wanted to improve their trophy program, their biologists joined Larry and I at Lake Hodges, and we secured some very high percentage strain Florida for the bass program in Texas. And interestingly, they came to us because our fish tested out better than the best fish they could find in Florida.
Really? Isn't that something? Huh. So you're saying that they had more of a like a northern influence in Florida, like
No, I don't know what was
genetically?
going. I couldn't tell you what was going on in Florida. I just
Hmm.
know that Texas was very serious about wanting to try to reach world record status, and they
I
were
think they
putting a lot
still
of
are.
money into it, and they dedicated a hatchery program to it. And they came to us,
Yeah,
and so we worked with them
yeah,
uh, through the Department of Fish and Game as well,
yeah.
because ultimately the California Department of Fish and Wildlife, as it's known now, is the agency that is ultimately responsible.
Right. Yeah. So you mentioned Larry Bottroff. What's Larry up to lately?
I hadn't seen Larry for a while. We'll call each other every few months just to check and make sure the other guy's still alive. And it turned out that I called him and we were able to go to Jim Slight's celebration of life service together. And I picked up Larry at his house, and
Yeah,
we were able to go over there for a very nice service.
yeah, yeah. I saw you guys over there, but I didn't want to bend your ear that day. Everybody, there was a lot of other stuff going on. So,
Yeah.
but
Well,
it was good to see him.
it was really neat because I continue to get calls all the time from people in the fishing community, and Larry's a little bit more uh, remote in that regard. I'm a lot more accessible. I mean,
Yeah.
I've been retired for 21 years, and I still have people asking me, why in the world are they doing this or that on the lakes? And I honestly don't know.
Well, that's why
But it,
that's me
it,
right here. This is what we're doing right now, and
I
we're
hear
getting to
you.
that point.
Well, it was great because a lot of people hadn't seen Larry.
Uh-huh.
And if anyone saw the story that I had written for SD Fish before it had folded, I did a really extensive dedication to Larry so that people would recognize the role that he has had in San Diego fisheries.
Right.
You know, we
Right.
we had a pretty good relationship. I tried to manage, the reservoirs and the staff and the public, and Larry managed the fish.
Yeah. Yeah. So I know he's remote is a good word to put it. He's hard to get a hold of.
Yeah, a little
I
bit.
want to get him on here, and there's been numerous requests for him to come on
I
the
bet.
podcast, and boy, he's just super hard to get a hold of.
Yeah,
So I guess I'll just leave it at that.
yeah, yeah. It might be hard getting him to do that. I think Jim Slight, sadly, who has passed, was probably your best bet at persuading Larry or tricking him.
Yeah, yeah. I talked to Jim about it, and
Yeah,
Jim had already he already told me how Larry felt about doing speakings and whatever, because we tried to get him to go speak at the club also, the San Diego
right.
Bassmasters, and he didn't want to do that either. So
Yeah.
anyway, um, so you were very adamant about working towards making the lakes a better experience and increasing angling opportunity for the general public.
It- ab-
Um,
a- Absolutely. The general public was my focus. Um, I'm that kid who grew up thinking the greatest fish in the world is the green sunfish, and
yeah,
in an
right on.
aquarium setting, in an
Yeah,
aquarium, it still is.
yeah,
And so my background in fishing um, has enormous respect for the people that are out there catching dinner, catching bluegill, fishing
yeah.
for crappie, fishing for catfish. Um, and so I greatly respected all of those folks, not
Hmm.
at the expense of trying to support other elements like our fly fishing clubs, our bass fishing clubs, or our tournaments.
Yeah. Yeah. So, I mean, why won't I don't want to get anybody in trouble, and I'm not going to throw anybody under the bus here, but at the same time, why don't we see the same kind of effort, I guess you could say, by the people in charge nowadays from what you did? Like, you were always for the betterment of the lakes, but now it just seems like they're on a maintenance level, or they're just cutting things
Yeah.
away, and everybody's okay with it in the people that take care of the lakes,
Okay, so
the
your
management.
assessment is correct, and I appreciate that you're showing respect to the people who are
Yeah.
working on the lakes now, because it's not their fault. Um, I would say that from the time the program was transferred from Park and Rec, which was the 1/3 of my career and the best part of it, to the water department. Um, from the time I arrived in the water department, where they didn't want me and tried not to have me coming with the lakes,
Yeah.
uh, what we accomplished was in spite of the people that I worked under, generally speaking. Now, I did have some good people, but in the course of a year of a career like I had, 29 years managing the reservoirs, you're going to have a lot of different people above you. And I had some good ones, and I had a lot who absolutely didn't care about the reservoirs.
Yeah.
So our accomplishments often were in spite of the people I worked for, sometimes at my own peril. And because would say that I was well regarded throughout the city, um, I was able to bully my way and get things done for the lakes that other people just couldn't.
So when the parks had it, and before it changed over to the water department, did you feel that you had more cooperation in betterment of the lakes?
Oh,
Like,
100%.
oh, okay.
So it's just natural, Bruce,
Yeah.
that um, in park and recreation, you have a situation where you have an administration that understands serving the public with opportunity for recreation. I
Mhm.
mean, it's fundamental.
Okay.
Um, and so the water department is quite a bit different. Their mission is to provide you with water, and of course, now that it's the massive public utilities department, it's also to make sure that when you flush the toilet, everything goes away. So they
Right.
have an enormous job of water and sewer, and recreation on the lakes. Clearly, by the way they operate, is highly insignificant.
So when did that take place? When did that switch take place? How
Well,
was it? It was a lot of years ago, right?
yeah, Prop 13 was in 1978.
Yeah.
And once Prop 13 occurred, it was just a matter of time before we would be transferred over to water.
Okay.
And that occurred around I want to say 1984.
Okay. Yeah. So um, there's rumor of the county the county taking over El Capitan, as in they took over uh, Lake Morena.
Right. That happened in 1960.
No, no, no. I mean, this is going to happen.
No, I understand. I'm
Oh, okay.
speaking with LAFCO on the subject tomorrow.
Oh, what? So is this going to happen? This is the county's going to take over El Capitan.
I don't know. I really don't. You're talking about politics,
Yeah.
and you're talking about the unique situation in which the city of San Diego owns 10 water supply reservoirs in San Diego County.
Hmm.
3 of them are in the city limits.
Yeah.
Murray and Miramar clearly are in the city limits. Hodges is, but no one knows it. So
Right.
you've got an agency, and they have 7 other reservoirs that are outside of the city limits. So they have the dilemma in terms of using tax monies as to how do you apply them. Well, are you going to put money into Sutherland or whatever? No one has wanted to wrestle with the difficulty of this. It's not impossible to solve. 5 years ago, Sandag was on the verge of having me attend one of their meetings and bring the San Diego Association of Governments together. And my vision was that in the case of a lower and upper Otay, where Chula Vista shares their shoreline, you'd get the city of Chula Vista to kick in some of the money to operate those lakes. In the case of Murray, where most users are from La Mesa, you'd find a way to get La Mesa to kick in some money. And in the case of Hodges, where it's kind of a mixture of users, but significantly benefits Escondido residents, you'd want to get to those folks too. In the course of the other lakes, Sutherland, El Cap, San Vicente, they're in unincorporated areas, and you'd want to get the county of San Diego involved in trying to figure out how they can serve their residents on those city properties. This is not nuclear science, but it is to the people that don't want to see something happen.
Right. Right. They just want to maintain the status quo. And if they could, it's my understanding is if they could close the reservoirs, it would be all the better. And we
Yeah,
and not have to deal with
you don't hear them
recreation.
say that because they know they couldn't get away with it, but they've done a great job of getting away with not putting any effort into them. Or
Right.
let me say minimal effort. And I'll give you an example. Before I had retired from the city, we had acquired somewhere between 17 and 19 million dollars in various grants. So I got the highest grant in the state of California in three categories. The Senate Bill 400, which was for fisheries enhancement, I got the largest grant in the state. Prop 18, which was a statewide California Park and Rec grant, I got the largest in the state. And when it came to the Department of Boating and Waterways, which is where your launch ramps, your parking lots, your restroom facilities, and the tables around them come from, I also got the largest grants from them. And we were competing against LA City, County of LA, everybody. And I was really fortunate. Some said I was pretty persuasive, but to get the 3 largest grant or the 3 sources of funding for reservoirs and to be number 1 across the entire state was pretty amazing.
So you had that much money. You had those tens of millions of dollars
Yes.
right before you retired.
Right.
And so the lakes have pretty much been living off of that money
No.
since you've retired.
No. Those monies were for capital improvements only.
Those were for
Okay.
like the lake houses and things.
Yes.
Okay.
So the capital improvements would be your
Right.
facilities.
Right.
The money for salaries, for running the lakes, for planting fish, those all have to come from another source. So the things I'm telling you about are hardscape.
Right.
They're not people.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. No, I was just trying to clarify this. I've heard this. I know I've heard this story, before, and I just wanted to clarify it for everybody.
Yeah.
So, oh shoot, I forgot. What was I gonna ask you?
By the way, Bruce, if you were old enough, I'd let you try to identify some of those bass lures behind my head, but you don't have a chance.
Really, no, I probably wouldn't. I got a couple of river runts and water dogs. They're not water dogs. They're hellbenders. I got a couple of hellbenders out there. Lucky 13s.
Yeah.
And mud bugs.
Yeah.
The bombers, the original bomber.
Yeah.
Mud bug.
Yeah. I had every color and model of bomber and I never
Yeah.
really fished them that much. So I was, we used to joke that I grew up. I mean, if you could see well, you've seen my den before. All you can see are rods
Oh
in
yeah.
here.
Yeah.
And, our joke was that I'm just queer for gear. I don't fish much, but I'm really queer for gear.
Yeah. Yeah. so, so, um, so there hasn't been any grants or anything since you've left.
There
Since
hasn't been an
since you
application for one.
how do you go about writing a grant? And I mean that's a big process, right? You need a team of
No,
workers to know.
no, no. Um,
Oh boy.
it's not as hard as people make it out.
I
The city
because
of San Diego did have a grants office, and I got very good assistance from them. But the
yeah,
job of getting the money is a person to person relationship.
it's
And
politics.
it's getting
It
the
is.
people in those agencies to have confidence in someone and the program.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And you do that with footwork.
Yeah.
You just have to get there. You have to meet those people, and show them that you have a good program.
Yeah. Yeah.
But again, it's frustrating to me. I got every grant I ever applied for, and after I left, there has not been a single application, to my knowledge, that
Yeah.
has ever been filed on behalf of the reservoir system in terms of recreation.
Right. Right. So do you know anything about this? I'm going to bring up this whole thing about the county again. Do you know
Right.
anything about the county of San Diego taking over the concessions or whatever at El Capitan?
I know I know nothing right now. The thing that I
Okay.
worked on was a much larger in scope.
Yeah.
Um, uh, Doing something at El Cap, that's a start. It's piecemeal.
Yeah.
But no, the things that I was trying to work on were all encompassing. They
So
probably would involve a joint powers authority being formed. However, um, once we got going on this, I was informed that the mayor didn't mind if the local agency formation commission, which is a state agency, looked at how the reservoirs are run, but they were unwilling to consider a joint powers authority. Well,
right.
I don't
Okay.
know how you get all of the other cities and the county involved if you don't come up with a joint powers authority.
Right. Okay. So you've been approaching these people and coming up with your own ideas of what to do of this joint power authority and working
Yeah,
together,
and to
the
be
county
really
and the city
honest,
working
I did
together.
meet with them. Well, I met with Sandag 5 years ago
Hmm.
with their chairman, and then I met with local agency formation commission 1 year ago. But when they advised me that the mayor was unwilling to consider a joint powers authority, I didn't really feel I wanted to spin my wheels anymore, Bruce.
Yeah.
Until people are ready to make a change and do something, you can't drag them to it.
Right. Yeah. So
You can do it politically,
yeah.
and that is a nice thing that you folks have done with the Friends of San Diego Lakes effort, but it's it's more involved than that.
Hmm.
And but honestly, if you had to be really smart to do this, I'm not your guy. But I'm pretty good at sticking my nose to the grindstone and getting things done.
Yeah.
But when they said no JPA or no Joint Powers Authority, I just felt that the best opportunity to serve the resources and the public was not going to be possible.
Yeah. Yeah. Right. So going back in your history, what do you think is the biggest improvement of the lakes that happened during your tenure at at while you were working there, while they were under your
Well,
control?
when I came into the lakes program, we didn't have launch ramps to speak of,
Is
and
that
we had
right?
very,
Yeah.
very little private boat use. So, in the old days, we were using old shoreline roads,
Uh-huh.
and then literally putting down asphalt if we had to, because we had no resources,
Mhm.
and the state would not let us have state money for the launch ramps. And here's the things that you and every other fisherman and boater should be concerned about. And that is that when you buy fuel, you're paying a state highway tax on it, right?
Mhm. Yeah.
But you're not driving your boat on the highway. The gas does not drive the boat on the highway.
Mhm.
So what they
Right.
did many
Right.
years ago was they created a state agency because it was a miss, because people who were knowledgeable and had a good accountant were filing and trying to get that tax money back. And so finally the state said, we have an idea. We have all this money that we don't deserve to have. We're going
Yeah.
to create a state agency called the State Department of Boating and Waterways. And we're going to do all of this work using boaters' money, whether it's going up and working on the harbor at Oceanside and putting in jetties, whether or not it's uh, working on loans to people who are putting in docks for sport fishing boats. I mean, that money is all there.
Mhm.
And we were not allowed to tap into it because we charged a fee for launch ramps. So we
Wow.
couldn't afford to not charge a fee. So I actually went to the state commission up in Sacramento and appeared before them and explained how many registered boaters there are in San Diego County, how many were using our lakes, how many more would enjoy our lakes with better facilities. And they waived that rule, and it's now been waived throughout the state. It's not just for San Diego. So you can still charge a fee. I think the fee has become too excessive now. I never wanted to see the launch fee go beyond $5
Yeah. Yeah. It is excessive.
because the city has no investment in that. Okay. That was
Yeah.
your money as a boater, putting in the launch ramp, putting in the courtesy dock. So I just didn't feel it was right that we did anything beyond a nominal fee.
Mhm. So that money goes into a slush fund, and they I mean that's why they're trying to take days away from us, is because we don't pay enough into the slush
Um,
fund.
it's it's really really difficult. My predecessor said that the city's approach to this is known as sleight of hand bookkeeping.
Yeah.
Uh, I was never really comfortable with that term, but I understand the basis for it. Um, it, it is costly staffing a facility.
Hmm.
There's
Yeah.
certainly been labor law changes that you would be aware of running a boat.
Hmm.
And in the case of the city of San Diego, uh, much of the grunt work was to be done by lake aides, or what used to be known as student workers. And they were paid a minimum wage, and they didn't get benefits. And for the most part, they were kids and they might have had benefits through their parents. But as the labor laws changed, it got to a point where if you worked anyone beyond 19 hours a week, you would have to pay them at least half-time benefits. So what happens is, as you know, running a business, you pay X dollars per hour at a fixed amount, but your overhead cost may exceed what you're actually paying. You may
Hmm.
have overheads for insurance, for
Oh yeah.
vacations, for disability, and all of these other overheads get added in. It just gets piled up and piled up and piled up. So uh, I don't think anyone could tell you right now what the city's direct and indirect overheads are that are
Yeah.
applied to the City Lakes program.
Yeah. It just gets so people, people don't understand, and then they get frustrated, and then they make accusations without really any knowledge of what is actually going on.
No, believe me,
So, yeah, I mean,
the
you know that.
people who work at the lakes are not to be blamed for these things.
Oh
They're
yeah, yeah.
they're the reason that our users, whether you're a picnicker, a hiker, a walker, a jogger, a bass fisherman, whatever, that the grunt work gets done. So,
Hmm.
so that you can be there. But there's a lot of people getting money, a share of the money in the city, and it just shouldn't happen. But all I can tell you is we, at one time, the city council asked me to do a policy called 400-3, and
Hmm.
400-3 was to protect the interest of the users on the lakes and to only charge anglers permit costs that would cover those direct expenses. And we were able to provide access at a somewhat reasonable price. And now that price has just gone up, skyrocketed.
Yeah. Oh, okay. I remember my question that I forgot. And um, so is there something written, some law or amendment or something that was way back, way back when the lakes were first built, guaranteeing us recreation on the lakes?
Yes. Well, if you go back to 1913, that's when the San Diego City Lakes program was founded. Now,
Uh-huh.
the city did not have the foresight of John Spreckles or Colonel Ed Fletcher. Those were private entrepreneurs who built water systems in San Diego, knowing that as developers, they would become very, very wealthy men by controlling the water. But in 1913, the city, which didn't have foresight, had something else, and that was eminent domain. And so it went through a process of taking from Spreckles and Fletcher the reservoirs they built
Okay.
and paying them what the courts agreed at the time was fair market value. So if you go back to 1913, that was the founding of our program. And
So
at that time, it was established that the
yeah.
public would be afforded recreational opportunities because that's what Spreckles and Fletcher had done. They afforded the public their opportunities, and they were very clever. They would hire people as caretakers, and they would say, well, if you can make some money on the side charging these yokels to fish or to hunt or to camp, go ahead. And if you could do that, they would pay you less as a caretaker.
That's a funny story. But it is written that there is a recreational opportunities that when the city wrote that into law.
Yeah, you're not going to find it stated as a law. You're not going to
Right.
hold anyone's feet to the fire over that. But
Yeah.
something that's more interesting is I'm currently the expert witness in a case of an angler who has filed suit against the city and county of San Francisco.
Uh-huh.
And so that has to do with public access to
Yeah.
water supply reservoirs in California.
Yeah.
And the state law, the interpretation of the state constitution, as well as some of the regulations pertaining to reservoir operators, that is all up in the air right now in the Alameda Superior Court. And I expect to hear, I think, before the end of December, the disposition there. And I have volunteered my time to assist those agencies up there to create a reservoir recreation program if they wished my help.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, that's interesting. All right, Jim. Well, we got about 45 minutes into it. You got anything else to add? We're about ready to wrap it up here.
I'm good if you are, Bruce.
Okay.
I'm glad that you are doing this, and I'm certainly glad that Rob McGargle is doing what he's doing with his website. And I really wish somehow someone would revive a SD Fish site to the level that it was at one
Yeah.
time.
Yeah. There's sdfish.org,
Right.
and it's just a forum.
Yeah.
You go on there and answer questions and whatever, but it's not the articles and everything that SD Fish was originally.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah,
Well,
that was a fun site.
yeah, and I don't know. I was probably 10 or 12 years ago. I did a story on you, and our good friend is the two most least known best fishermen in San Diego County, and you guys are
That's
both
right.
very eclectic, which is what I appreciate in terms of fishing. And you guys, do a little bit of everything.
Yeah, yeah. That whole fly fishing thing, that's a lot of fun.
Yeah.
Still got a bunch of tackle out there. Um, the that I it's very it's really hard to do for bass. There's a very small windows of opportunity for the fly rod with bass fishing. But breaking fish, it works great for breaking fish.
There are a few people. Do they still make AA worms?
Yeah, yeah.
Okay.
That company's still around.
Okay. So I'm going to somewhat argue your point about just breaking fish and tell you that I have been out with Gary White when he was running AA worms. He had no idea that I was a fisherman at all. And he was going to show me what bass fishing was on the lakes. And we went to El Cap. And I told him if he didn't mind, I was going to use my fly rod and my Hank Naverka popping bugs from the Colorado River. And I think I put 15 bass in the boat before he got one. And these were not breaking fish; these were shoreline huggers at dawn.
Yeah.
And really, I've got a friend who's a fishing guide in Northern California, a guy by the name of Mark Pinto. And as good a fisherman as you are, Bruce, and as much work as you've done catching fish on a fly rod, I think you'd be surprised what Mark's doing on stripers and largemouth right now.
Uh-huh. Well, up north they do that float and fly, and they've been there was a tournament that was won on Shasta 2 years ago in the winter. I think it was February, and it was on one with a fly rod, and
Right.
it was with that float and fly, which is kind of a jig.
Yeah, and I'm not even
Underneath
angling
the
that.
bobber,
I'm
but
I'm an old school cork bass bug guy.
yeah, yeah. In the
So
summertime, that's all right.
yeah,
Works.
well,
Those deer hair poppers.
I'll
Those,
promote it April through October. You do it when you want.
okay. All right. Well, it was great to have you, Jim. Thank you for coming on and sharing your knowledge with us. It's truly appreciated, and we will ask you back in the not so distant future.
Yeah, anytime, Bruce. I'm glad to try to help out, and if I get any word that is worth sharing on
Yeah.
these other developments, either with the local agency formation commission or
Yeah.
others, I'll be glad to share them with you. But there's work to be done,
Uh-huh.
and no one really is grabbing that bull by the horns, and it has to be done if these reservoirs are going to their potential is going to be realized for the public, and who these reservoirs are for.
Right. Yeah, exactly. All right. Well, thank you very much. We will talk
You
to you
bet.
later.
All right.
Bye-bye.
Good luck.